Our guest today is Deborah McNelis. Deborah is a visionary and innovator in child development. She has her master's in education, and she's a published author, speaker, and creator of neuro-nurturing and founder of Brain Insights. She developed the unique neuro-nurturing interaction series, also a children's book called I'm Gonna Be the Best I Can Be Because of Neuro-Nurturing. I love that. And the founder of the First 60 Days movement. She makes brain science both understandable and easy to implement into everyday life, and loves seeing the aha moments occur as she shares insights with those who care about making a positive difference in the lives of our children. Welcome, Deb, to our interview today.
Well, thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be invited.
So I've known you for some time, but I'm always amazed at your wealth of knowledge and your inspiration about child development. And my first question is, what got you interested? Like, what drove you to do this brain development and inspiration relative to child development?
Well, it really goes back to when I was a freshman in college, and I was watching a children's choir, and I hadn't decided what I wanted to major in college yet. And I was watching those children sing, and I had this thought: all of the adults in those children's lives don't know all they could know to help those children become all that they have the potential to become. And that thought just inspired me. It's one of those goosebump moments, and it just gave me direction. And I have followed that direction all of my life since. And I went into early childhood education at that time and got a bachelor's degree. But that was a time prior to the brain research information coming out, because it was so long ago that I was in college. And everything was based on theory and behavioral studies at that time. So fast forward and into the 90s, and the technology was more advanced, and scientists were able to see what was going on in young children's brains and what was influencing their brains one way or another. And I got so excited. I thought, well, we have now science saying what children need and what's beneficial to help them become all that they have the potential to become. So I learned everything I could, and got a master's degree in education, as you mentioned, with the emphasis on adult education, because now I wanted to teach adults about how children's brains developed. So I then had an opportunity to work for an advocacy agency. I live in Wisconsin, and it was the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families, and they had a brain project. And this brain project was developed in collaboration with Dr. Bruce Perry, who is a renowned scientist in the area of child development and brain development especially. And so I had that opportunity to learn through his information. And after about 4 years, that project ran out of funding. So I tell everyone the project ran out, but my passion to get the information didn't end. And I just wanted to find a way to continue to share that. So I started my own company called Brain Insights, giving insights into the way that children's brains develop. But as you said in the introduction, I share it in real, simple, understandable ways and make it practical for everyday life.
Awesome. Awesome. So when I'm thinking of the word ethos, in other words, like the joie de vivre behind what you do. So I hear the science piece of it, but what's your internal passion? Like, in other words, when you see the way the world is and you have that vision that you got years ago, what's that? Tell us about the passion, because that's the thing that makes all of us move, rather than just the facts and the science are information, right? What's that love and that joie de vivre inside of you that keeps you going with this?
Yeah, the love is knowing that these babies have this potential, and it's so critically important in the earliest days, weeks, and months to recognize that potential and that opportunity we have in those babies. So providing the optimal experiences that they need, since experiences are what contribute to the way in which a child's brain develops. So that nurturing, responsiveness, that love, that conveying their worth, and that they're safe and secure. That's the love part. And I want every baby to feel that and develop knowing that they're worthy of love and acceptance.
So as you describe that, I'm just thinking, like, I'm taken to like maybe some experiences that you may have had in your, how many years now? 30, 40 years of doing this?
Mm-hmm.
The ups and the downs. So when you see the downs, when you see kids that aren't nurtured properly, which I'm sure you've seen a bunch of, how are you able to create a difference there? Whether that be to the caregivers, the adults, in other words, the parents themselves. Now you work with kids one-on-one, of course. You've got your own kids, you've got grandkids, as I understand. What I'm sensing is, like, when you see it not working, that must give you like a whole new, what does that do? Does that relight your torch? Does that give you more of that oomph? God, we've got to do something about this.
Exactly. So what I tell audiences when I do presentations is my goal is only to reach everyone. We need every adult on this planet to understand, because we all benefit as a result, and the children benefit. Yeah. So in your question asking about if a child hasn't received what they really needed, the good news is, and this is something I always love sharing with people that I'm talking with, is that the brain is always changing throughout our lives. The brain is always making new connections and regenerating, reorganizing. And so those pathways that have been developed possibly by adverse experiences have the potential to make those changes. So you're so right. I feel like, yes, we just need to get this information out, and this is what the child needs now. If they didn't get it before, at least they can get it now.
Yeah. So it brings up the next thought in my mind is, like, it's never too late. Like, right. Whether that be at 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, the brain never stops developing all the way into our 80s and 90s. We know that through brain science and
to death. Exactly,
yeah. Right? No matter what the Alzheimer's and the dementia and the, whatever the standard neuroscience, which, if it's standard, unfortunately, it's not keeping up with the change of what keeps us vital and thriving. Can you tell us a story or two about some of the shifts that you've seen when you've applied some of the techniques that hopefully you'll share with us as we go, and the change it's made, like real world stuff?
Yeah. There's one point that I want to make, that the brain can make changes and does make changes throughout life, as we've been talking about, but I am really prevention focused, so that the time to make the biggest influence, the biggest impact, is in the earliest days, weeks, and months, as I said earlier. So the brain is developing most rapidly in the earliest part of life, and it's called plasticity. It's making those changes real rapidly, actually at a rate of 1 million. It's making 1 million connections per second.
Wow.
In those earlier years. So it can make those changes later, and does make changes later, but it's slower. So a lot more repetition of experiences, consistency, time, patience, sometimes money is going to make those changes later. So in answering your question, I started my career by teaching kindergarten, and I didn't know the brain science then, that the information wasn't out then, but you could see the difference. Some kindergartners coming in, those 5-year-olds, and I had experiences of children that haven't had a lot of adversity in their life, and giving them that positive attention and recognition and patience and consistency, and just acknowledging who they are and showing them that they had worth. It was dramatic. You could see some dramatic change over a school year. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, how fulfilling that must be, Deb. Just incredible, because there's something that happens to us. We don't think of children with our mind. We think of them with our hearts, and when they prosper, when they when they're able to move forward in life and when they're happy, when a child comes in the room, it lights up the room, right? So when children are fulfilled, what are some of the words that you use for when they are engaged, when they're learning, what are some of those power words that you use when you know that a child is developing, like in an upward sense, in a positive sense?
Yeah, I always say it's when they're in that zone, it's like you can almost see the brain connections happening. You can envision that's going on. And I
Yes.
do a presentation specifically on the way in which the brain focuses attention and how that makes a critical difference. So however, whatever we're focusing our attention on is physically making connections between or changing connections between the 86 billion brain cells that we're born with. So,
Cool.
so watching them when they're in that mode and then not interrupting them is something that I often talk about and share with parents. When they're in that mode and they're really focused, like you just described,
Yeah.
you don't want to interrupt them. You might want to be well-intentioned and say, "Oh, what are you doing? I want to know tell me about it." And those kind of questions, which are all well-intentioned and positive, not a a negative thing to do, but it's more advantageous to let that child process what it is they're processing. We might be guessing they're trying to figure this out or learn about what that does, but they're processing something in their mind. And we all know as adults to be interrupted when you're in the middle of a process that you're figuring out or creating. We don't want to be interrupted, and it does make a difference in the process. So yeah, when the child is in that mode, we want to just acknowledge it, watch it, observe it, recognize and respect it.
Wow, I've learned something pretty huge from you right there. And it makes so much sense, Deb, with what you just said. And I think of, the newer generation of parents, let's say this last, whether that be from boomers on, some people, and we're not judging anybody when we say this, but we've had, helicopter parents, the ones that hover over and smother, and then there's ones in between, and there's ones who don't do any of what you just said. They don't even like get down on the floor, and for whatever reason, whether that be a predisposition with familial stuff or societal. So I'm thinking of how that child is in that moment when the parent is observing and has created a safe space, a space where the child can discover, because that's the key word that was coming to me when you were speaking, was discovery.
Mm-hmm.
That's all those new things that are happening where those millions of synaptic connections are being made. Would you say that's the difference with neuro-nurturing compared to other approaches towards child development, that you encouraging the discovery and the letting the kid just experience?
That's a big piece of it. So neuro-nurturing, that term that I trademarked that you mentioned in the introduction,
Yes.
What is a term I created because oftentimes if adults are hearing the term brain development, there's a couple of connotations that are common. And one is that, oh, that's going to be high levels of neuroscience terminology. I don't want to deal with that. And how is that going to affect my life anyway?
Sure.
Or they think that brain development is only about intelligence building or knowledge acquisition. And so I wanted to come up with a different term to talk about it because how the brain develops is encompassing all of who a child is. As I talked about, especially like their worth, that's, you don't often think about that the brain is influencing how they feel about themselves and their self-perception and if they're worthy of positive things in their life.
Yeah,
so
that's huge.
Yes, it's kind of the core of why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Feel that worth and that acceptance, and that they can expect positives in their life, and have a positive self-perception. But to get back to your question, now I'm losing what the question was.
Well, the discovery and
Oh, yes.
having an environment where the parents are fostering that rather
Right.
than doing it the way they think it should be done, the way that the
Right.
parents taught them, etc. You know, that you've created a
Exactly.
model, a neuro-nurturing model that makes it easier
Yes.
for parents and caregivers.
Yes. Thank you for the refreshing on the question. Yes. So I was explaining what neuro-nurturing is, and what I realized early in doing my presentations prior to developing the term neuro-nurturing, I would always say at the beginning of a presentation, to develop a brain well, it isn't all that complicated. If you're providing for the physical needs, the security needs, providing nurturing, and providing an abundance of play, you're doing what a developing brain needs most.
So
that's
say those factors again, Deb.
Sure. Providing for the physical needs.
Yes.
Providing for security, providing nurturing, and providing play. And if you're providing all of those 4 areas for a child, you are doing what that child needs for optimal development. And what I did then is created a list of 5 factors that go into each of those areas, so that adults that are influencing children either directly or indirectly, maybe they're developers of curriculum, maybe they're developers of policy, or program implementation, administrators. They might not have direct contact with the children, but they're having an influence by how they decide those things are going to be provided for children. And then there's, of course, the people that are working directly with children. So I broke it down in those 5 areas or 5 aspects of each of those 4 areas. And then I do trainings to help parents understand, well, what goes into this, and why is nutrition in the brain? Oh, I just think of nutrition and helping my child's body and brain grow. I mean, body grow and develop, but it has something to do with nutrition and the brain. And then they learn all of that.
Yeah, wow. So I'm getting a series of questions in my mind now. Where do you see the biggest difference? Like, in other words, what sector of our population? Like, is it inner city kids? Is it the early stages of like K through 3 or 4? And I'm fascinated with where you've seen the greatest amount of shift and transformation.
That's quite a big question. Because the reason it's difficult to answer is because, as I keep saying, the earliest days, weeks, and months are the most influential. 80% of the brain develops by the age of 3.
That's huge.
Yeah. However, there's a chart that shows this is how we spend money. It goes in this direction. We spend money in this way from here's newborn to, full adulthood. The brain doesn't finish developing until about the age of 25 to 30.
Right.
So here's how we spend money. We spend the most money at the end of when the slowest part of development. And then it's inverted for this is when the most rapid brain development is happening, and we spend the least amount of money at that time, at that highest rate of development.
I see where you're going with that. Yeah, it made sense the moment you started saying it. So if we gave you a magic wand, okay, and like I Dream of Jeannie came out and she said, Masto, one request, what would that one wish that you would have to empower that to create an inflection point for those early stages of brain development in our children? What would
I would have every adult, but putting the emphasis on expecting parents. If expecting parents and anyone that's going to be involved with that child, so if it's childcare providers, if it's grandparents or the next door neighbor, whoever, is going to have an influence on that child, to have them understand all that influence and what the positive influence would be for that baby. And there's so many things to think about and be aware of. And there's so many aspects that influence baby that people don't think of, that marketers are not supporting, promoting things that are actually based in science. There's so much information on the internet that is conflicting.
Yeah.
That these people are saying this and these people are saying that, and it all needs to be based on science and what's proven to be the beneficial thing for a baby, so that all babies are starting with this understanding and this knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I can just imagine how overwhelming it must be for a parent, but also the grandparents, because they want what's best for that little kid. And then there's the teachers and the community that supports that child. But in these super early stages, in those 0 to 3 years, when you've got 80% of that development, I don't want to try to squeeze everything you've learned into like 2 sentences. But if you were to say, if there were 2 or 3 crucial factors, unless you've already mentioned them, when you mentioned physical security, nurturing, and play, like when a person's starting out as that new or expecting mother, new expecting parent, because dads, they're huge in our kids' development.
Oh, yes.
Not just the mom.
Yes.
And that father is at least as important in that kid's development, right? What would be the 2 or 3 factors that a person should be at least aware of in that first year, even in utero? Because I mean, that's a whole nother interview. We can do that interview. The whole in utero concept, right? So what would be those 2 or 3 factors that would be the most important, would you say?
I can tell you the number one, and that is consistent, responsive nurturing to the baby's expressed needs. That baby is expressing a need through crying, through body language, through expression, and that's attuning. That's a big part of it, attunement, tuning into what that baby is trying to convey to you, and then responding to that need. Whether it's, I just need to be held, I just need to be close to you, I need to be fed, I'm cold, I'm lonely, I'm afraid, I'm scared, any need that baby has, they need their primary caregiver and others to respond to that need consistently. So that's one of my biggest, and it's not one of the big things I share or want to make widely understood, is that doing that is not spoiling a baby. So many myths are told to parents, and one of those is the biggest myth is if you pick that baby up too frequently, you're going to spoil them. It's just the opposite. You are contributing to the highest functioning area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and that baby feeling safe and secure and worthy, and some of the things we've been talking about. By consistently responding, that's exactly what they do need, because we are carry mammals. Just like a kangaroo or just like a koala bear, we are carry mammals. Human beings are designed to be close and connected and have that the sensory experience of that closeness, that safety, that security. And if you're responding, you are contributing, as I said, to that highest functioning area of the brain. If you're not responding, say you're following the let them cry it out during the night theory, and they're scared and frightened and they're separated, you're contributing to the stress response system, and their stress response system gets over-connected. And those are children that, are fearful. And it leads to all kinds of things, including health, physical health, mental health.
And that's earlier stage trauma than most psychologists would ever be able to detect. And the individual, when they become an adult, they'll never remember those early stage traumas because that separation anxiety, which is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Separation from the mother is the first and most endemic part of lack of nurturing and the basis of the self.
Exactly.
Like, wow, that's
Exactly.
huge. I mean, oh my God, you just hit on the Rock of Gibraltar there. Yeah, like, gee. I
I
mean, I
think
was
I've shown you, I think I've shown you, Paul, right? I have this booklet called
I've
The First
scanned it,
60
but go
Days.
ahead. Yeah, tell
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. And so that's the first myth that is addressed in this book. There's 22 myths that are addressed.
Yeah,
And that's the first one that is addressed. And the way I present it is I share the myth,
yeah,
then the baby's perspective about that myth,
yes.
and then neuro-nurturing knowledge. So parents are getting that clear understanding in such an easy, simple way.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's the first one in that book because it's so incredibly important, like you just said.
I was picking up two elements of that. One is during the day, when the kid is expressing, through crying and of course, when they're not crying, sometimes it's the looking around that they're reaching for something with their selfness, right? We want to encourage discovery, right? But at the same time, should I bring that toy a little bit closer because it's halfway across the room? There would be one instance, but the extreme of that you just mentioned before is like what happens at nighttime when the kid is literally screaming, in tears. The extreme not nurturing would be let that kid sit there and cry, and unfortunately, that's just reinforcing traumatic emotions that could take years of therapy to release when we're adults. So you're talking about fundamental foundational levels of deeper than psychological self-connection and worth and love. And gosh, that's where self-love is developing,
Mm-hmm.
like there are really core beliefs that we used to teach in a lot of our seminars that we did. I am safe. The world is safe. I am loved. God loves me. Those things are at the level that you're talking about, Deb. They don't get delivered when you're in high school or when you're in college. Oh my God, this is huge. Wow. I mean, I'm almost got chills a bit on my spine of the ramifications of your work. So before I ask another question, tell me what's in you right now? What are you feeling that is important to impart to the people that are listening to this? What's the next step?
Well, like I keep saying, I want everyone to understand this. So taking advantage of ways that you can learn this through the information that I share, both in presentations, I have one-on-one sessions. I used to always do only, hired presentations at conferences and workshops and so forth. And I just thought, why don't I open it up and do one-on-one sessions for people that just want one to learn all of this directly with me? So
Cool.
I do that, and then I have these materials in addition to the first 60 days booklet. I have these physical flip books that give parents an activity idea or interaction suggestions on the front of the card. And then on the back, it gives the brain insight as to why it's and how it's benefiting the child to do those activities.
Beautiful.
So all of those different ways.
Awesome. So let's say a person chooses to work with you. Like what can what are their biggest challenges when they come to you, and how can you help them?
Well, they might be having those conflict, getting all those conflicting bits of information. Their mother-in-law might be telling them one thing, and their next door neighbor is saying, no, 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 and the internet says this, and so confusing. And it's such a impactful time in the parent's life.
Yeah.
That so much is going on, and so excitement and fear and uncertainty and all of
Yes.
that. So that's the biggest thing that I try to diminish all of that, diminish the confusion, and diminish the uncertainty, and increase the feelings of confidence. And I know if I go this direction, it's going to help me be the parent that I really want to be.
Awesome. And I'm thinking of your experience being a mother, and a grandmother, and of course, then all the people that you've mentored or that you've taught, whether that be one on many or individually. There's an old saying, Deb, and it says, only those who have been there can take you there, right? So you're not talking about just book concepts. You're not talking about like just the science piece of it. You're talking about the experiential piece. So if I was a new parent, I would want to work with you because I would need to find out those critical pieces, some of which you've talked about. So what's the next step? Like I'll put a link to your page at the bottom of this interview. What would it be like when someone works with you? Like, what do they do? Like, what do you guide them through?
Well, first of all, if they go to that link that you're going to share, they will get a free guide. That's called the Neural Nurturing Guide. And it just gives them some simple understanding. And it starts with, I'm focusing primarily on providing this information, as I said, for new and expecting parents, but it gives also information for the later years and as the child develops. So they'll begin with that. And there's a few questions if they decide that they want to sign up for a one-on-one session with me. There's a few questions that they can answer that will give me the insights to begin with where they're at and what they're curious about, and will give me insights as to what are their concerns and where should we start with the conversation. And then I will go step by step through a lot of information of understanding the basics of brain development and what science shows is most beneficial and why, and things that you may not have even thought about. Like, do you need all this equipment that marketers have created and promote? Is it good to respond to the baby? Those kinds of things. There's so many, and for the adult as well. So, I mean, this is your life too, not just your baby's life. And do you have to be a perfect parent? Do you have to do everything right? Answering those kind of questions as well.
Cool. Awesome. Wow. Thank you for what you do, Deb. When I first woke up this morning thinking of our interview, I thought, here's a person, Deborah McNelis, who's responsible for partially responsible for our future, because our kids are our future. Like what a blessing you are, and what a blessing the work that you do. In Hawaiian, they call it your kuleana. That means that is your moral responsibility. That's you're brought here to do, which gives you that joie de vivre, that passion. So thank you so much, Deb. Let's do another interview sometime. Like I referred to the in utero thing. We could talk about that, but also to expand maybe on some of the things that we've just talked about. So thank you so much for your time today, and sharing your love, your wisdom, and your passion about neuro-nurturing and the future of our children.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your interest and your invitation, as I said, to talk about what I am so passionate about. And you're right, it can make a difference for individual children, but it can make a difference for our entire society and our entire world, actually, when this is understood.
Yes, they are our future.
That's right.
Yes. Cool. Thanks again, Deb.
Thank you.
Okay. Talk soon.
All right. Bye.